What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here, back again for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm joined once again by a great friend of the show, Dan Fetes of Wham 13, Rochester sports anchor. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining me.
Yeah, happy to be back. It's been a little bit.
It's been a little bit. The last time we talked on the show, it was in the middle of the season. We were just in the midst of that Tennessee Titans game, which was a little bit of a weird one for Buffalo. We didn't reach that dreadful ending of that Arizona Cardinals game. But what a season it turned out to be. The Bills went on that torrid run, made it to the AFC title game, ultimately losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. What were your thoughts on the season that was the 2020 Buffalo Bills season?
Well, I think going into the season, I think we all were going to base the amount of success and if it was a good season or not on Josh Allen. I think that was the whole thing. And you saw that Josh Allen, put himself as a top-tier quarterback in the league. And I think that gave so many people comfort, so many people excitement, not only inside the locker room that we probably have our guy, not only in the front office saying we picked the right guy, but, in the fan base together as, again, of just saying that, he's their franchise quarterback. He's going to get the extension. I've been saying I'd rather have it be sooner rather than later. I think Josh Allen's only going to get more expensive, but he's proven that, he can make adjustments, that he's not this one-trick pony. I think this big arm guy, I think he has shown that he's, that his mind is catching up to his talent. And I think when you see that, that's understandable to see that, not every guy comes out of a non-Power 5 conference and lights the world on fire. And, like I said, we saw before where Josh Allen, I think, used to wait until guys were open to throw it to them. And then you really started to see him throw guys open. And I think that was the thing that you got most excited about, where you're like, we haven't seen people do this in Buffalo in a long time. So, overall, it showed that Brandon Beane knows what he was doing, getting Stephon Diggs. That's a franchise-altering trade that really kind of shifted, because you can't talk about Josh Allen's success, Ryan, without talking about Stephon Diggs and vice versa. So, big step forward. I think it put things, on the track that many thought they'd be. I thought they were going to be 13-3 before the season. That was my prediction. So I was pretty good.
You were spot on.
and the funny thing is how bad the defense was at times. I think that was one of the things when we talked about earlier in the year, that they were just struggling. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that a lot of the moves that we have seen, especially on the defense this offseason, have pretty much just been bringing guys back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're just bringing guys back. So you kind of know what you have.
You know what you have, and as we were kind of preparing for the show, we talked, a little bit in detail here about the Bills, and before we were on the air, I guess you could say, and the biggest takeaway that you have is that this time around, heading into this offseason, this draft, which is always important, the NFL draft, it appears as if the Bills have competent front office members. Like, we're keeping our own, we're bringing back our guys, we know what we have, and we're bringing those guys back. We're adding a nice mix of veteran talent with some younger guys that have maybe not made the most of their first stop in the NFL, and Mitch Trubisky, but hopefully will be that QB2 that can be a placeholder for Josh Allen. Out of the additions, though, that the Bills have made, which is your favorite Bills addition to date, if you were to pick one?
Yeah, I think Emmanuel Sanders is a really smart move. And that goes to what we were talking about, that there are grown-ups running the team for once. That's got to be the most exciting thing. It's not something that I've really been covering this team for 6 years. I have seen a ton of. So, I talked to NFL Network's Mike Giardi after the signing and in talking about the AFC East in general got a lot better. I know that they're not all great contracts and that New England probably overpaid a little bit for a lot of their guys, but their talent is better. And the Jets added pieces. Like you can't not look at Corey Davis and look at Carl Lawson and go they're better. And they have a real head coach now without any. So I was asking him, and they said that the Bills are still projected to be the division champ. And that's great. And I never said that when I tweeted out that the AFC East got exponentially better. I wasn't saying anybody had caught the Bills. I'm just saying that right. I find it hard to believe that the Bills will go undefeated again in the division. I just with how good the division seemingly got. And with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders, it's just a smart move. You release John Brown, who was good, but just injured, and you saved $9 million there, and you spend 5 to 6, however you want to, call it, on Emmanuel Sanders. Like saving $3 million, helps bring back John Feliciano, and like a bunch of those little things. And Mike Giardi just goes around the league. Everybody just went, that's a really smart move. Like he doesn't have the top end speed of a guy like John Brown, but he's a really good route runner, a really experienced guy. And I think that goes to show what Josh Allen has found success with, knowing where Stephon Diggs was, because Diggs is such a good route runner. He could trust on him and count on him. I think that's what you're going to see with Emmanuel Sanders, a guy that Josh can count on to get open, to run his routes the correct way. I mean, you think back to when Josh came in the league, it was Calvin Benjamin was supposed to be his number one, and Deontay Thompson. And we were sitting there, and I was one of them criticizing Josh for like, why haven't you thrown for 300 yards yet? And all of these things. And then you look back and you're like, maybe these guys stunk that he was trying to throw the football to. And so when you bring in another veteran, like you said, wise addition to this offense, because like it's 2021, the NFL is, you just got to score more points than the other team. And defense it's important. Yeah. And yeah, you can kind of run some things back, but I've always been team offense, build offense, because you're going to need to win shootouts 35-33 sometimes.
I was pretty inspired, I guess I could say, by the persistence of Brandon Beane, that Emmanuel Sanders was just very forthright in the Zoom call after he was, in our facility and everything, saying that Brandon Beane had tried to go after Emmanuel Sanders on multiple occasions via trade when Emmanuel Sanders was a free agent last year, and even dating back to when Doug Whaley was our GM for the Bills there for the few years that he was. We had Tyrod Taylor still as our starter. Josh Allen wasn't even in the building yet, and that they were interested in Emmanuel Sanders. So it's cool that they were finally able to bring in a pros pro, a true pros pro that's played with the likes of Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Big Ben. And for Emmanuel Sanders to recognize, as the kids say these days, real recognizes real, for him to recognize that Josh Allen has a little bit of what those guys have, Big Ben, Drew Brees, and obviously maybe not quite Peyton Manning yet, but potentially Emmanuel Sanders sees that in Josh Allen. That's what I'm thinking, right?
I thought that was really interesting when he pointed out that, like, even though he was watching film on the Saints and he was going over his stuff, he was also watching about 10 to 15 minutes of Josh Allen and the Bills offense. And like I said, nobody would be watching the Bills offense 2 years ago. Like, it just wouldn't happen. And it goes to show the culture that, Sean McDermott has built. It goes to show the guys that Brandon Beane has brought in. It goes to show you what a guy Brian Daboll is. Like, I just can't say enough. I think I've said it. I always joke around that, like, my Twitter account is a Brian Daboll stan account, because like this guy is incredible. It's the best thing that the Bills didn't lose him. It's a travesty that he's not a head coach yet, because he deserves all of it. And you have guys like Cole Beasley, who was an SMU teammate with Emmanuel Sanders. So like there is, again, I kind of got into it with some people on Twitter just saying that, like, we all thought Matt Milano deserved big money, and that Bills fans shouldn't be upset when somebody that they draft, they bring along, wants to go get money. And like, they're allowed to. And I even thought Brandon Beane was saying that, like, with free agency, and he had said, like, Milano has earned free agency. And I was surprised. The Bills got really lucky, Ryan, this offseason with the pandemic and the shrunken salary cap, because the top end guys still got paid. The top safeties, J.J. Watt still got his paid, but the guys in the middle, there wasn't that $15 million a year deal that Matt Milano. So instead of him taking 11 somewhere else, he's like, I'll just take 7 now here in Buffalo because I like where it is. Like, the Bills got hometown discounts this offseason because of the way the salary cap was. And John Feliciano and Darrell Williams. Like, we didn't know what, they're not top end guys, but it was really nice to see there was some hometown discount. Isaiah McKenzie today said that he wanted to stay in Buffalo if they would have paid him in candy. Like there is something to this of what they're building here in Buffalo. And I think some fans were like, well, I would take $1 million less to be in Buffalo. And it's like, well, we're not in that situation, Ryan. Like, I'd be upset if my boss wanted to take away $1,000 because that's my right. So it was nice to see guys, some of them restructure their contracts. Mitch Morris pretty much just losing $2 million was very surprising to me. But again, I think you saw what happened with some guys. Maybe they went to Mitch and said, like, hey, we're like thinking about moving on and like we can save the money. Do you want to take $2 million less to stay in Buffalo? You don't have to worry about free agency. You don't got to move. And Mitch probably said, like, yeah, that's fine. I highly doubt Mitch called up Brandon Beane and said, hey, guys, I got $2 million burning a hole in my pocket. Like, I know they say mutual, but there was probably some things along the lines where, guys were thinking, like, I know what the market looks like out there. I don't want to go through that right now. I want to stay in Buffalo because I know that we got a chance here. And like I said, it's been this offseason has been team run it back, Ryan.
Yeah, team run it back. They recognize where they were and just how close they actually were to being in a Super Bowl. And, that AFC title game, I won't lie, it was a little disappointing. I thought it would be a closer game, but they know that there was still one game away. And if they could get back to that AFC title game, right that wrong, maybe they right that wrong against Kansas City, maybe they don't. Each season's a new season. I'm not willing to say that it's going to be Kansas City and Buffalo back-to-back in the AFC title game just yet. It's probably the obvious pick right now. The betting line would probably show that. But I will say that to your point about the AFC East, I somewhat have recognized a little bit of a role reversal between the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots in the sense that the Bills are able to get these guys back on hometown discounts, whereas the Patriots have to overpay for some of these
100%.
free agents due to the fact that they don't have the attractive track record from this last season to really pull guys in. They have some openings with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. They bring those guys in. But if you had Tom Brady on the Patriots still, those guys would take less money to play with Tom Brady. But being that he's not there, Patriots are forced to pay those guys more money. What do you think of that thought?
It's Bill Belichick not hitting the panic button, but bringing the panic button over to his desk and go like, I can't go 7-9 again. Like that. Right. That's the bottom line is that he sees what is out there. And you're right. Players wanted to take less money to play with Brady. It's the same thing in the NBA. Players take less money to play with LeBron. Like it's just what it is because you want to be around winners. And Josh Allen has proven right now that he's a winner and that you're getting hometown discounts from guys. And you can't underestimate not only what it is, but it's Brandon Beane too. John Feliciano's Zoom call where he said like, Brandon Beane is a dude that doesn't lie to you. He shoots it to you straight. He's around the team 24/7 that like when he tells you something, he means it. And that goes a long way. And that when kind of push comes to shove, Beane wants to win and this organization wants to win and they're doing everything they can. So it is interesting. I know a lot of people are making big deals about these Patriots contracts and they're saying these guys are so overpaid. The cap's going to go way up. Like we do have to understand that maybe in 2 years when the salary cap's so high up, we're going, that's not the crazy contract for Jonnu Smith anymore. Maybe that's not a terrible deal for Bourne, who's like a middle of the road wide receiver, or you're looking at, some of the other guys, Nelson Aguilar. Maybe that makes sense. But yeah, like those are problems that future Bill Belichick is going to have to deal with. For the time being, he just knows he can't go 7-9 again. But Ryan, I mean, they don't have a quarterback. Like that's the bottom line. And if you don't have a quarterback in this league, you're not getting anywhere, as Bills fans have learned for 19 previous years.
It's as if they're trying to, the Patriots, that is, they're trying to surround Cam Newton with as much talent as possible, thinking maybe, just maybe, we can squeeze the juice that's left of Cam Newton, the good juice that's left out of him. And I don't think he has anything left. I just don't. Just based on not just this past season with the Patriots, but seasons prior with Carolina. It's almost as if, I hate to say he's damaged goods, but looking at the rest of the AFCs too, I mean, I really like what the Jets did with Corey Davis. He's a quality player. Keelan Cole, kind of a mid-tier wide receiver that, is not a great player, but he's a decent player. And you look at Carl Lawson, that's a premier free agent pass rusher that they were able to bring in. So, dare I say it, I like what the Jets and what Miami did a little bit more than New England, because they actually have younger quarterbacks that you might not know what Tua's got. You might not know what Darnold's got, but that Cam Newton is 31, 32 and kind of on the wrong side of 30.
The only thing that that is about New England, and everybody's kind of saying, there's two tight ends, like they're not Gronk and they're not Hernandez. Nobody says they are, but there is always that little bit of thought in the back of your head that Belichick's playing chess while we're all playing checkers. Like there is just a little bit of that sense of feeling. And the tight end is becoming a crucial piece of NFL offenses. I know people are like, well, Belichick's going to try and turn back the clock to Gronkowski and Hernandez. Like, no, he changed the NFL by going to those two tight end sets. Like, It wasn't just Jimmy Graham. It was Belichick knowing how to use those guys. And I know that people said that Jonnu Smith wasn't really, he didn't have all these catches in Tennessee and in Hunter Henry. Yeah, he battled injuries, but he was healthy and didn't do that much even with, a good Chargers team last year. Like, yeah, but now he's got Belichick. Like, these guys are now away from a run-heavy offense in Tennessee and Anthony Lynn, who may be one of the worst head coaches in the NFL. So, like, these guys are not going to be put in different scenarios. And what I think they're going to try and do is Belichick's going to try and dictate what other defenses have to prepare for. I think he's going to want to try and get a lot of nickel defenses to face him. And then I think he's going to try and run the ball like he wants to.
Right.
So like, that's where you're saying is that, like, you're like, these guys aren't that good for the money they got. There is always that thought in your head, Ryan, that Belichick's smarter than everybody else in the room and that he's doing this for a reason and he's going to get the most, not necessarily out of Cam, but the other guys that he's bringing in.
Makes sense. And in the sense that, he's paying that much for those players because he knows what he's going to do with them. And he knows how crucial they will be to that offense. And Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, two really solid tight ends. Make no mistake about it. I think that those moves were great. Matt Judon, that guy is a speed demon of a pass rusher. So I'm excited to see how that kind of materializes. But I still think that this is Buffalo's division to lose. Like, this is still their division to win, theirs to lose, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And a move that I honestly feel is probably the most underrated move, a move that I didn't see coming. When I saw it on your Twitter there, I was actually pulling into a parking lot. I think it was pulling into Target or something like that. And I pull in and I see Mitchell Trubisky signs a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills, the new QB2 with the Buffalo Bills. Good move or bad move? I'll just throw my 2 cents in. I think this is not just a bad move or a good move. I think this is a great move by Brandon Beane. I think that this is a move that this will play the difference of being a contender or a championship contender when we're battling for that home field advantage. God forbid if Josh Allen were to go down, there's not much of a drop-off physically between Allen and Trubisky, where you wouldn't really have to change up that Brian Dable offense too much. What do you think of that?
Couldn't agree more with your take there. I think that's spot on. I was the one during the offseason, depending on what Cam Newton would have looked like if they would have brought him in, I was team Cam Newton for quarterback number 2. Like, kind of do that Jameis Winston in Buffalo. Again, how often have we heard Josh Allen comparison to Cam Newton? And, like, I thought, hey, you want to know what? Matt Barkley's a great guy. He seems like he's great in the room. He put up 40 points on the Jets like not too long ago. Like, let's not forget, but like we've also seen when he came in, when Josh got concussed against New England, he threw 2 late interceptions, kind of looked like a fish out of water. And that's not a knock against Matt Barkley. He is a career backup. And that's not an insult. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. But Brandon Beane, again, as we mentioned before, upgrading wherever he can. And this is a big upgrade. Matt Barkley to Mitch Trubisky is a big deal. And again, Bills fans probably hope that Mitchell Trubisky never sees the field. But in case, he's a much better breaking case of glass, breaking case of emergency than Barkley is. So I agree. He fits the system. He's a starter. He's an NFL starter. Like, he's probably a top 31 quarterbacks in the league. So why wouldn't you want to bring him in on a 2-year, low-risk, high-reward deal? And it just makes a whole lot of sense to, in worst-case scenario, if Josh goes down for 3 weeks or something like that, like, you
knock on that wood, man.
like it's not the end of the world. And I think that's what you're saying. And I totally agree.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable. I feel at ease if Allen were to be out, that, hey, numbers wise, I wasn't watching every single Chicago Bears game. I'm watching the Bills on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, but maybe Saturdays if it's flexed later in the year. But I'm not watching Chicago Bears games. But I can say that, it's a rarity that you have a 4-year quarterback coming out of his rookie contract as a free agent for all 31 other teams to bid on. And to get that guy for $2.5 million for a season is to say that it's a bargain is like stating the obvious. But I really feel like Trubisky numbers wise was pretty good last year. Didn't do terrible. Wasn't as bad as the year before, but there were some weeks where I thought he looked pretty good. And I'm excited to see how we develop him. Worst case scenario, we have no need for him at all. And a quarterback on another team gets hurt. What do you think of Buffalo possibly even trading him in the preseason?
Bean's done that before. He has flipped guys in preseason. And like I said, quarterbacks are a hot commodity. Everybody's trying to find one. I think that's another great point that I hadn't even really thought of, that, who wouldn't throw a 5th-round pick if your starter goes down and you're, I don't know, the Saints, or you need somebody else and you just need a guy, the Jets. I don't know. Like,
right.
I'd be hard to press to believe that the Bills weren't the only team in on Trubisky to back up. I don't know what the other money was out there with Trubisky. I haven't seen that, but just look, he's a competent starter. I'm not saying he's a great starter, but he started over 40 games in his 4-year career. He kind of was thrown into, what ended up being a dumpster fire. It's not his fault that he was drafted 2nd overall by a bad organization. Like, right. You kind of have to factor in all of that stuff, and it can be a rebirth. But like I said, the fact that Josh showed last year that he knows how to take hits, not take as many hits, but be smarter about them. I was talking on our podcast on BuffaloPlus.com. I think the Indy game in the playoffs was really the only game where Josh got hit a couple times that I was like,
right,
dude, like, take it easy.
Throw that away.
Yeah. But besides that, like, Josh showed that he had to, the composure and the presence to throw footballs away and not take too many hits. But again, it is a great break in case of glass, that it's a move that, again, Bean always talks about it, but to put your money where your mouth is and say, we're always looking to bring in competition. We're always looking to upgrade every position. This is a big upgrade, bottom line.
Yeah, I think so. And bear with me on this thought, but when you look at the rest of the AFC East, does Buffalo have the best 2 quarterbacks in the division? I mean, it's a thought. And the fact that it's a thought it goes to show you that
that's actually a really good point.
I mean, I'd take Trubisky over Darnold. I would probably take Trubisky over Cam. I'm not sold on
Tua. The one.
I'm not sold yet on Tua. It's too soon. I don't know whether I believe in him or whether I don't. Too green,
And that's the interesting thing. I remember watching that Week 17 game with the Dolphins, and I was at the game, and I just looked at the Dolphins as last year's Bills. Like, they were a little bit ahead of themselves. That I don't know if they necessarily thought they were going to be this playoff contending team. Obviously, they mismanaged everything with Fitzpatrick and Tua because I think they wanted to know what they had with Tua, and they were winning games with Fitzpatrick, and they didn't really know what to do, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot there. But that's a really good defensive team. That's a really good young head coach. I don't think Brian Flores gets enough. I love his fire. I think he's a guy that guys want to play for. So it'd be interesting to see because, again, we didn't know what Josh Allen necessarily was going to be like heading into his third year, and Tua is going to be heading into his 2nd year, again, coming off a hip injury, coming off a weird COVID season. We didn't see a whole lot of AJ Epinesa. And I know some people, Jenna Contra, my coworker, she was disappointed in AJ Epinesa. She was disappointed in Ed Oliver's play. And I was like, I understand, but I don't think they ever meant to throw AJ into the deep end of the pool. I think with this COVID offseason, all of this stuff, I think it's going to give guys another full year in this system will be telling.
I completely agree. The fact that we didn't have that normal offseason last year, and the fact that the offense of the Buffalo Bills was so prolific, and now you add in this veteran experience in Emmanuel Sanders, you were able to keep some of your own with Darrell Williams and John Feliciano, which I was ecstatic that they were able to keep John Feliciano. I didn't anticipate that. I felt like one of those guys was going to go, whether it was Williams, Milad, maybe even 2 out of 3 of those guys were going to go, potentially all of them, who knows? But I was very, very happy when they brought back John Feliciano. And moving forward from their offense, we're not even in the NFL draft discussion yet. We haven't even touched on that. So the fact that this Bills team, as it stands right now, could probably win the AFC East again, could probably run the table of the AFC East. We haven't even had the draft yet. And what are you thinking as far as with the 30th overall pick and the 2021 NFL draft? See, I lost a year due to COVID-19. I'm behind. So in the 2021 NFL draft, who do you think the Bills could target potentially?
We were just talking about this on our podcast too. I haven't gone in depth on players yet. Marcel from ESPN, great guy. He is banging the drum for Travis Etienne.
Yes, he is.
I'm all for playmakers. Look, there is no position. We were just talking about this on our podcast. There's not one position that the Bills could go with at pick 30 that I would be stunned unless it was a tackle. A tackle would be the only position that I would be like, well, they're set at that. And we saw last year that Brandon Beane said it 2 years ago at the NFL Combine that you draft for not necessarily a need, but like where you might go, like what you might need next year. And we saw that with Gabriel Davis. We saw that with AJ Epinesa, like guys that didn't necessarily need to play right away, but they got to kind of get their toes wet in the water, and then now they're going to be depended on. I really think AJ Epinesa is going to have a big year. Obviously, we've seen what Gabriel Davis can do just in his rookie year. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills picked a wide receiver. Why not? You got 2 years left on Cole Beasley's deal, 1 or 2 years left on Cole Beasley's deal. You signed Emmanuel Sanders to a 1 year deal. Like, we'll be talking about wide receivers next year.
Right.
Could they go? I don't think there's a tight end that grades in the first round besides Kyle Pitts, and then there's a shelf that drops off. I wouldn't be surprised if we look at an offensive lineman. If they go, like I said, they could move on from Mitch Morse at the end of this year. They can move on. John Feliciano's deal is pretty much a 1 year, $5 million deal. So they could move on from Feliciano, or maybe Cody Ford doesn't pan out. And they can draft an O-lineman that doesn't need to play right away, but that next year you and I are having this conversation going, well, this guy's going to be plugged in.
Right.
Could they go linebacker? Could they go corner? Like it is crazy to think that this Bills team is built well enough. I know it's not the sexy take or the hot take, but it's like, I really wouldn't be surprised if they go in any direction. And I know it's not.
I think that's a solid take. Yeah, I agree.
It's not the hot take of like, they should absolutely take this corner, but like they do need a corner. Why couldn't they take a safety? Poyer and Hyde are great, but like they are getting up there in age a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And also, if they're going to go with, the league is turning so much into covering tight ends. Do they go with somebody that can cover a tight end? Do you have a linebacker that maybe, I don't know what happens with Tremaine Edmonds. Like there's a million different ways that this team can go that when the pick comes in, I'll go, yeah, that makes sense. I can get behind that pick. So I've been against the running back. I'm more in favor of a speed guy that can do some things. I always look back to, I tweeted out the one time that I think CJ Spiller would fit really nicely in this offense right now. That like he was ahead of his time. That
I'd agree with that.
A scat back guy, some guy that could, do some things out of the backfield, catch the ball as well as run it. So I'm open to all suggestions, Ryan, for this 30th overall pick. And I wouldn't put it past Beane for moving up or moving back either. Like this is going to be an NFL draft that is in person in Cleveland, which will be awesome, that we will all be sitting back there. And I'll be at the edge of my seat going, no clue where Beane goes with this one.
Right. And this is like the first time in a long time, as you've alluded to, that the Bills have this unique opportunity to just take whoever they want. Obviously, they're not going to take a quarterback, so Bills Mafia, they know that. But as far as the Bills Mafia actually demanding, Travis Etienne or Najee Harris, I want your take on this. I feel like those are both guys that could come in and be immediate impact players, but I'm not quite ready just yet to give up on Devin Singletary and Zach Moss to where I would be willing to invest a first rounder in a running back in today's NFL. Like the teams that have done that, it's been like the elite of the elite guys, like Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, and those are top 10 picks. Josh Jacobs was a top 25 pick, but there's some major gaps in years between teams taking running backs in the top 10 and in the top 25. So I have a tough time believing that, one of those two guys is justifiable at 30. I know Travis Etienne's a great player, but for this team with who they have and what they might need, I feel like corner would be a really solid addition if they could go attack the corner position. I know Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace was brought back, but there's a little bit left. Corner. Yeah, there's a little bit left to be desired there. Like, they're picking on Levi Wallace because Trey White's just so damn good. They're picking on Jackson because Trey White's so good. Let's not give the opposing offense the opportunity to pick on anybody by getting like a true cover corner that could man the other side. That's how
I completely agree. And like I said, if you followed any of my takes on Twitter, I'm just not a fan of running the ball nowadays. Like, I just think it's so and for the fact that the Bills, are saying, well, you have to run the ball, you have to be able to run the ball. Like, you don't. I'm sorry. Like, you don't. You want to be able to do it when you need to, but like, to sit here and say that you have an all-pro, borderline MVP caliber quarterback, and we're supposed to hand the ball off 20 times a game just doesn't sit well with me. Like, Josh Allen is the offense. Like, we're not saying that Aaron Rodgers should hand the ball off more, or Russell Wilson, like why take the ball out of your playmakers' hands? So again, while I would love somebody that could give Josh Allen help, again, this was a weird offseason. The offensive line, while it was back, it did, they lost Morris for 2 games. That kind of threw a wrench into that. Quinn Spain was a weird exit. So they were trying to find some continuity. Obviously, Brian Winters didn't pan out. Like, Butker played well. Cody Ford went down. Like, there was a lot more moving and shifting with that offensive line than we originally thought. And I would much rather try and spend an offseason trying to rework an offensive line blocking scheme to run better than to sit here and bring in 2 guys. I mean, Ryan, the last 2 years, the Bills have spent 2 third-round picks on running backs. And now we're supposed to spend another one on a first-round one. Like, I think that might be overkill, and that would be Bean kind of throwing in the white flag of saying, like, I swung and missed. When 2 years ago, he said Devin Singletary was the most explosive, fun player he's ever scouted. So I just don't see that direction. Do I think Travis Etienne could help this team? Yes. But to what level? Where, as you said, a cover corner could come in and play, 90% of the defensive snaps, whereas you draft a running back in the first round, he's going to play what, 25? And
that's sharing a timeshare basically with Singletary and Moss.
Have under contract. Yeah,
they're still under contract. Yes, I just don't think that really solves anything. And not to interrupt you there, but I definitely feel that the corner is a better spot. And in terms of what we have, like, and who we're going up against pass heavy offenses. We just went up against Kansas City. That's like, for me, and call me crazy here, but I think that if I'm in that front office, I'm doing whatever I got to do to make my team be able to go head to head with the Kansas Cities and the Clevelands of the world. Like, I'm not trying to take other teams for granted, but we know where we stand. We know where we stand now. Like, this isn't last year where we thought, are we going to win the AFC East? We won the AFC East. We went 6-0. I don't think we'll go 6-0 again in the division, but I definitely could see us playing in the AFC title game again with who we have. And so, I think that's like the next, like, losing that game. If I'm in that front office, I'm thinking we got to get back to that game and not just get back, but win it. And that's kind of the old school Buffalo Bills mentality too.
My only fear is and there were so many questions at Bean's end of the year press conference, and he was asked over and over again about Kansas City, and Josh Allen was asked about Kansas City. In every exit meeting, we all asked about Kansas City, and they were right, and they all said it was the gold standard. But, like, at some point, things are going to change in Kansas City. Like, they're just going to. Like, we all expect, like, Patrick Mahomes isn't going to go to every Super Bowl for the next 5 years. The Golden State Warriors didn't break the NBA. Like, things change, injuries happen, and my only fear is when you become so fixated on trying to stop one team that it can hurt your own development. And I trust Bean enough to be smart enough to know, like, I'm not going to mortgage the farm just to try and beat the Chiefs, because somebody else could beat the Chiefs in one game. We're acting like these Chiefs are unbeatable in all of these things, and yeah, they were very good, but they also erased double-digit deficits all last year in the playoffs. This year in the playoffs, they had to come back. Like, they're not unbeatable. And again,
right.
I go back to, again, like, it was really smart for Bean to re-sign Feliciano, to re-sign Williams, because you have to protect your all-pro quarterback. Like, your MVP caliber quarterback. Like, that's where you start. Josh Allen's the start of this team. You need to be able to have guys, in front of him healthy and able to. So we saw what happens when Patrick Mahomes went down, but it's so easy to look at the recency bias of, well, the Bucs won the Super Bowl, Ryan, so you got to run the ball and you got to have a tight end. And it's like the Bucs were 28th in the NFL in rushing yards per game during the regular season. Like, don't let 2 or 3 games cloud your judgment of what it takes to win a Super Bowl. The Bills were 45 minutes away from playing in the Super Bowl. So you don't need to throw out the Bills' game plan and start over from scratch. It's moving some pieces around. Again, I'd like to see an addition at the tight end room. I don't think Dawson Knox has lived up to what it is. I don't think he's a bust, but I don't think he's the number one guy. And Ryan, yes, everybody in the league is trying to find a Kelsey, a Kittle, or a Waller. But they don't grow on trees. And
that's what I was going to say. They don't grow on trees.
So, like, that, again, like, we're sitting there like, well, what would you like to do with this team? It's like, I don't know, there aren't a whole lot of holes, but a tight end would be cool. But we'll see.
It's easier said than done, especially as far as finding a tight end like one of those guys. And you touched on a point too, like with the whole running back thing. This Bills offensive line, what made the running game so ineffective and their passing game so effective is that they have a pass blocking offensive line. Their offensive line is not really a run blocking offensive line. They don't have the X's and O's guys, the cover one guys. They'll get this. The pull guard that Richie Incognito was, they don't really have that on this line. And that comes into play with a guy like Cody Ford, where I think he's one of the biggest questions that this organization has, wondering, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Where is he going to line up? Is he at left guard? Is he at right guard? Is he at right tackle? We know that Deion Dawkins is their left tackle. We know that Darrell Williams was the right tackle. So a lot of questions still have to be answered that were questions last year that weren't answered last year. So I think that offensive line could be another area of emphasis in the draft, whether it's the first round or at any point in the draft. And I wouldn't be opposed to it because you have, as you said, a future, $35 million a year, $40 million a year quarterback potentially that you got to maybe even higher than that. Yeah. So that you got to protect. So, I mean, as far as protecting Josh Allen and building this offensive lineup, do you see that as like a strategy possibility as well?
Well, that's the thing. And I know a lot of people have complimented Brandon Beane for some of these guys that are under contract through 2022 or 2023. And everybody's like, these are great. All these great contracts. Like, Ryan, like, all these contracts are 2-year deals. Matt Milano's contract is a 2-year deal. Like, John Feliciano's contract is a 1-year deal. Like, in reality, like, NFL contracts are the biggest lie in sports. So, like, while we all sit there and say, like, these guys are locked up long-term, it's like, yeah, if some guy has a bad year, where they're probably moving on. If John Feliciano has a bad year, like, there's no guaranteed money for him, like, after this year. Like, that's another thing, that Beane was a wizard with some of these deals. Matt Milano, too, like, his contract is pretty much going to be a 2-year deal, which will be when Tremaine Edmonds' contract could be up after his 5th year. They can pick up his 5th-year option, and then you would pretty much have Milano coming into a 2nd year where you could kind of move on, or Tremaine Edmonds. Like, all of these things are next level that Beane was thinking. So you know that you have Deion Dawkins. What are you going to do with Mitch Morse? What are you going to do with John Feliciano? A great question mark with Cody Ford that they seem to love. Everybody is, Beane doesn't blow smoke up people's skirt for no reason. And he made a big point to just talk about that Cody Ford's one of the best 5 linemen in this organization. Where that is, I'm not exactly sure. But I think Cody Ford's going to get every chance to start somewhere. And continuity is big on the O-line. I was really excited to know that they were going to bring back all 5 guys from last year. And the O-line was good in pass protection. But Josh got rid of the ball a lot quicker. Wide receivers got open quicker. Like it's a whole big thing. Like sacks aren't always on the offensive line, and like sacks aren't always on the quarter. Like it's a big thing that like people can just look at a game and be like, well, Josh got sacked 6 times. Those bad offensive line play, and it's like, well, Josh ran around maybe a little bit too much, and maybe the corners on the other team were coverage sacks. So I do think that like again, Josh Allen is your guy. You have to keep him upright, and you have to keep him happy. Otherwise, he's going to be like Russell Wilson complaining about getting hit too much. And we don't want that to happen.
We do not. I have a lot of questions in regards to other storylines in the NFL. As far as the Russell Wilson thing, there was the rumor and the report actually that Dan Patrick stated on his show that the Bears offered 3 first-round draft choices for Russell Wilson. Like, is that? And I want your insider info on this. Is that actual like? Was that just spitballing, or was that actual fact that the Bears offered that deal from what you've heard?
From what I heard, that the Bears kept calling and kept calling and kept calling and kept calling. Like Dan Patrick was saying too, what was it, 7 or 8 calls he made and the Bears made? It's interesting because Houston, from what I'm hearing, Houston's not even answering the phone calls about Deshaun Watson.
Right.
So that's an interesting dynamic. But again, quarterbacks are so hard to get in this league, and we've never seen an offseason like this. The Dak Prescott deal, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, where quarterbacks now are pretty much saying, like, I don't want to play places. And it was so weird, Ryan, the fact that Russell Wilson's agent says, like, we haven't requested a trade, but if we were, it would be to these 4 teams. It was like, so you are
requesting. That's what I thought
like
too.
Politely.
So you are requesting a trade, and the fact that the Raiders were on that list, I was like,
it was. And like I said, again, Derek Carr like concerns. Like there's a whole big thing that's going on in the NFL where quarterbacks and players in general seem to be kind of flexing their muscle a little bit like NBA players have. And like I said, NFL contracts are garbage. They're good contracts. Every contract's a good one until it's not. And a perfect example is Carson Wentz, because you look at that and you go, that was a great deal, except it wasn't. And now you're still on the hook for that. So it's very, and that's the thing too, is you talk about these price tags for quarterbacks. Like, I know Josh Allen is going to be in Buffalo long term. I know there may not be any theoretical rush, but Dak Prescott got about $40 million a year. So whoever is the next quarterback to sign is going to be making more than that. That's just how it works. It's not necessarily, are you better than Dak Prescott? It's just your turn is up as the quarterback to be paid the most. And my fear is, I think Josh could say, like, I joked around that, like, Josh was a winner from Dak's deal because Josh is going to make a couple extra more million now. But if Cleveland decides tomorrow that Baker Mayfield's worth 42, Josh is now worth 43 a year or 44 a year. Or if Lamar Jackson signs for 44, then Josh gets to say, I'm worth 45. So I don't think that they want this hanging over their head going into the season, especially with all of these things that are going on with quarterbacks being unhappy. I think a deal gets done before the year because I don't think Bean or McDermott or Josh want to be answering questions from us about, hey, what's it like playing without a contract? And, this being in your last year. It's just a matter of, I just think that every day Josh could get a little bit more expensive.
Which I know that's the reality. That's a reality that's on its way. There's no doubt about it. And it's well-deserved because Josh Allen came from Fireball, California, no D1 offers, plays 2 years of JUCO football, goes to Wyoming, does some decent things there. Actually came back from a collarbone injury there. Not many people want to throw that in there. First year, yeah. And then ends up being the face of the Buffalo Bills for many years to come, the heir apparent to a long wait between Jim Kelly and Josh Allen. So, if any quarterback in the league deserves a big pay raise, it's Josh Allen. And I say that proudly, and I say that with excitement and joy, but I also say that with a hint of dread, because when you have a quarterback that gets that much money, Dan, I'm a little bit worried that we're not going to be able to build around him if he's making that high cap number. Is that a fear kind of that you might have as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's any fear, but it's the quarterback. It's the most important position in all of pro sports. So,
it's
and like I said,
territory.
Right. Will there be a hometown discount like some of the other guys? Maybe, but I don't think Josh owes it to anybody. Like, I know a bunch of people were like, oh, hometown discount. It's like when Trey White became the highest paid corner, nobody was saying that Trey should have taken less money. Like these guys have earned all of this money that they have gotten. Now, what's interesting is, especially because of the cap number this year and everything like that, I thought it was interesting how the Cowboys were able to structure Dak's deal. And it pretty much, again, it's a 2-year deal, and Dak can rework that contract and get another massive deal in a couple of years, and that's great for him. As the cap number continues, will continue to go up and skyrocket because TV is throwing billions and billions of money in there. But it was interesting how they structured that deal in a cap-friendly way. Now, look, if you have an owner that can cut you a check and the direct deposit hits for $76 million in that first year, that's awesome, because like Dak's cap number isn't as massive as people tend to think it is. He's getting a lot of signing bonus. It's a lot of front-loaded money. And it's funny because a lot of the Bills contracts are backloaded right now. So it's like backloaded now, and then if we need to, we can kind of get out of that big money at the end. Like, it's smart by Bean. It's just really smart.
It is.
I just wonder what the Josh Allen thing will do. Will he say, hey, I'll take less annually, but I want $80 million guaranteed? Can the Pagulas cut that check? Will they be comfortable cutting that check? I know a lot of people always talk about, moving the cap around. I know as much about the salary cap as I know about how airplanes fly. Like, I know they fly, but I couldn't tell you how. And somebody else explained the best of trying to understand the NFL cap is like trying to nail smoke to a wall. Like, you just can't do it. There's smart guys in the room, but a bunch of people say, like, well, just turn their average salary into signing bonus money. Well, not every owner can do that. Not every owner is willing to just start cutting $9 million checks left and right. So that's another conversation. The Pagulas, they are hemorrhaging money, it seems like, with the Sabres. It seems like it hasn't affected the Bills, and that's an amazing thing. But all of those things go into working besides just the fact of giving Josh Allen a contract extension.
Talk about hemorrhaging the Sabres. I mean, I have right next to me here, I ordered this at the start of the season. Shout out to 2006, the Slug. I ordered this hat for 2 reasons, okay? Not only do I find the Slug to be appealing, I'm one of the few people that do. And for the viewing audience, I'm holding up the Slug hat. But it brings me back to a time where the Sabres were a respectable hockey organization. And I see your tweets every day. I see your tweets every day, and covering Western New York sports, Bills, Sabres, obviously. What are your thoughts just on the current state of the Buffalo Sabres, and what do you think will happen and transpire in the near future to make this team great again, I guess you could say? Or will they?
It's sad, Ryan, because I think it still has to get worse before it gets a little bit better.
Right.
And right now they're the laughing stock of the league. There's no getting around it. I compared them to, organizationally, they're the Houston Texans of the NHL. Like, just nobody wants to touch them with a 10-foot pole. And that is the problem, because you need a coach that can come in with some experience and leadership and a pedigree. But I wonder why any coach with a pedigree would want to touch this dumpster fire with a 10-foot pole. That's the problem. Could you get a Boudreaux? Like, could you get some of these guys that I think would be great, because you still have Jack Eichel and you still have some young defensemen and Rasmus Dahlin and young talent? Or do you just say, like, I just don't want to do that? So then you have to go and recycle, you have to go find a young coach and that may not know how to run the organization. And that's where this circle of misery has come in, because it's not only the fact that they've lost 14 straight games. It's the fact that how they've lost them, Ryan. It's the fact of the lackluster effort. My favorite tweet that I've had this year is that over the last 18 games, if the Sabres goals were worth 2 points instead of 1, they would still be 7 games under 500. Like, if they got 2 points for every goal, like, that is how bad they have been. It's injuries, and it's, I know you had tweeted it too, and I follow your social media just saying that you're not in favor of trading Jack Eichel, and I completely understand. And he's a top 15-10 player in the NHL. But if this keeps getting worse and worse, unfortunately, if he wants out, you're going to then get 75 cents on the dollar. And
That's what I'm afraid of. That's kind of like my stance is not necessarily that they'll trade, that I don't want them to trade Jack Eichel. What I'm fearful of is that this dumpster fire, this cluster, is going to continue, and it's going to continue in such a bad way, in such an ugly way, that it's going to force their hand to trade Jack Eichel for the worst return possible for a player of his caliber. That's like my worst fear right now. That is my worst fear for the Sabres. Not even the fact that they'll lose 15 in a row, the 15th in a row tonight against Pittsburgh, probably. The fact that breaking a franchise record, the fact that they could trade a guy that they tanked for ultimately. For 4 years, they tanked for this guy, whether it was McDavid or Mick Eichel, the whole thing. And potentially they could trade him within a year for a batch of, third, fourth line wingers and a couple late round picks. I mean,
100%.
Man,
and you've seen it happen.
Very tough.
And you've seen it happen in other sports. You've seen it happen around the league where a guy just says, like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play here anymore. And then he has the leverage. Other teams have the leverage, and you have none of it. Again, and my only thing is, like, I think Jack Eichel is an incredible talent. There's no question about that. But he ain't helping you win now. So,
yeah.
And like I said, I think there are good pieces. I was not a fan of the Kruger signing when they hired him.
Right.
I remember texting Matt Beauvais, who is the smartest Sabres guy I know, sports director at WKBW in Buffalo. And I texted him and I said, if this goes bad, this is going to look really bad. And he's like, well, they're trying to go outside the box. And I go, right. But if you go outside the box and you swing and miss, it looks worse. That you get a guy from the EPL that hasn't coached in the NHL in 5 years, and you try and beat the game, and it blows up in your face. It looks bad, and that's how it went down. And they had to make the move. It's not a pretty move. Donnie Granato is a very well respected, long-time coach in the NHL. Happy for him, but I don't know, Ryan.
Do you think that, obviously there are names out there, the Bruce Boudreaus, the John Tortorellas that are possibly leaving Columbus and looking for a new job? I would love one of those guys, but with that comes the thought of what coach, as you said, with a pedigree, and I agree, I want a coach with a pedigree more than anybody right now to come to the Sabres, but what coach with a pedigree is going to come to Buffalo and put the reputation on the line and mix it up with this organization that is losing its reputation, and it's a bad reputation. They don't even have a reputation anymore. It's just they're one of 31 at this point. I don't see the Sabres ownership, the Pagulas, being able to attract a guy like that, and I don't see them spending money on a coach. I mean, they spent 3.9 for Ralph Kruger. We're spending $3.9 million for Ralph Kruger. I would hope and pray that you double it to bring in a John Tortorella or a Bruce Boudreau, but I don't think they're going to, Dan. I really don't.
And the thing that kills me the most is to see this organization flounder when the Amerks here in Rochester, where I am, were a model of a consistency over the last 4 years. They were winning. They would go to the playoffs. They were a top seed in their division, and they were grooming what I assumed was the next head coach in Chris Taylor. He was a longtime Amerk.
I thought the same.
Was honestly, talking to Tails about hockey was enlightening. Understood the game, understood how to develop young talent. And I'll never forget when we would ask him, young prospects coming up, like Justin Bailey, like some of these guys that you see now, like Victor Olofsson and Tage Thompson, when he would come down, and I'll never forget, like Tage Thompson, when he was having such a bad season in Buffalo and all these things, he'd come down here and he finally would get to play minutes again because he was up in Buffalo not playing. And he had one of the worst first periods in his first game for the Amerks. And Tails still kept putting him out there for penalty kills, for power plays. And we asked him about it after the game, and he's like, that's what you do with young players. Like, they've got to go through it. Like, you have to work through the pains. And then you talk to Tage Thompson, he's like, that shows a lot about a coach. The fact that he's going to trust you to get out there. And you see how well Victor Olofsson's playing. You saw Bryson, the defenseman that I really like.
Bryson? Yeah, Jacob Bryson. Yep.
He was great last year with Taylor. He came in, like a bunch of guys that you're seeing excel. The few bright spots in Buffalo, they were coached by Chris Taylor. And when Ralph Kruger came in, he didn't want Taylor around, and they gutted the Amerks. And that where you're sitting here and we're talking now going, man, who's the next coach? Who would take that job? And Chris Taylor is now an assistant coach with Lindy Ruff in New Jersey. And I just think about it every day going, man, I was sitting there talking to him like, what's it like? You're going to be up for an NHL job. And the rug got pulled under him and he had no idea he was going to get canned. So
that's terrible. Yeah, that was not
a guy that paid his dues, a guy that knows all about the Sabres organization, been a part of the Amerks organization. He's a Hall of Famer, captain, won Calder Cups, all of that stuff, like knows what it's like to grind and knows what it takes to be a winning team and what it takes in the DNA. He's not there. And you're right. You're going to have to overpay for a coach. And from everything we have seen that the Pagulas will pay for in Buffalo and for the Bills, and that's great. They are pinching pennies with the Sabres.
Yeah, that there's no doubt about it. And man, I think this is going to be a very interesting next few weeks here as we inch closer to the trade deadline. I could see Taylor Hall getting moved. I could see Eric Stahl getting moved. I could see Ristolainen finally getting moved, much to the delight of Sabres Twitter. I'm kind of fascinated by their disdain for Risto. He's a love-hate player, but I've always liked him. I feel like he's one of the few guys on the team the last 8 years that's actually gone 100% every night. Ice time leader. I mean, I'd hate to see him go, but man, what a contrast in the state of the franchise between the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres. I've never seen anything like it, not just in Buffalo sports history, but really city to city. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan for baseball. I see, compare Boston sports, the Red Sox to the Patriots. I mean, they were both excellent at one time. They were both bad at one time. I've never seen a city have a productive football team and literally the bottom of the barrel hockey team at one time. It's pretty fascinating, let alone with the same ownership group. That's pretty interesting. So hopefully better things are ahead for the Sabres. We know great things are ahead for the Bills. Dan, always a pleasure talking with you on my show. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on as always, Ryan. Take care, man.
Take care, buddy. Stay safe and go Bills.
Go Bills.
That was Dan Fetes, Wham 13 sports anchor. Dan Fetes, always a pleasure having him on the show. Greatly enjoy interacting with him on all things Buffalo Bills. Got some Sabres discussion in there as well for the hockey fans out there. Stay tuned for more episodes of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and Facebook. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, recapping the Buffalo Bills offseason to date and a little bit of a preview of the 2021 NFL Draft. Take care and stay safe.